I'm Karima Brown. It's Sunday morning and it's time for The Fix. First up, we examine the developments at the Zondo State Capture Commission of Inquiry, as Treasury officials gave first-hand accounts of what they had to do to protect the institution from Gupta-led looting. Then we look at SAA, our beleaguered state airline, which looks increasingly unviable. In addition, we also take a look at the nexus between the looting of VBS and leaders of the economic freedom fighters. And then we unpack the weekend headlines and what lies ahead for the week to come. The Fix starts now. This is The Fix, where every Sunday, without fear or favour, we question the big role players, and we will look ahead to tell you what matters, how it affects you, and why you should care. With me, back in his seat, is my sparring partner, Peter Bruce, Sunday Times and Business Day columnist. Peter, welcome back.
Thank you very much. I've missed all the excitement in South Africa. I've been in Britain and Ireland. They've got their own problems.
Yes.
But South Africa was hot last week, eh?
Very, very hot. And of course, it didn't get hotter than outside the Zondo Commission of Inquiry.
Well, it was outside, but what was happening inside was also pretty important, I think.
Absolutely. And I think the contrast of outside and inside is actually important because the objective of the EFF and the BLF was, of course, to distract us from what was being said inside. And what was being said inside, for the first time in very, very clear terms, first cabinet minister, sitting cabinet minister testifying, explaining President Jacob Zuma's, intrinsic central role in running matters of state and particularly getting involved in the nuclear deals, hands on feet and all, okay? And then, of course, what Pravin Gordhan did was lead us into the testimony that was to follow from the DG that served at the Treasury for 19 years. And the most shocking thing for me that he said was, of course, that he was called by Enoch Godongwana, who is a long-standing member of the African National Congress, to say that he's getting a Gupta minister and that they are arriving with their two advisors. And then here's the funny thing, Peter, on the issue of advisors, it is the Director General that needs to formalize, the process. And the advisors came and, told him what to do. And of course, they were obsessed with VR Laser because VR Laser was the company that was half owned by Salim Essa, a known Gupta associate, and of course Duduzane Zuma. Yeah.
It must have been very difficult for these guys when that all happened. Fortunately, it didn't last all that long. 4 days, 2 of which were on the weekend, if I'm not mistaken. The more than what Lungisa Fuzile has had to say. There are stories now beginning to do the rounds. Well, we all knew it was happening at the time. But there was an effort inside Cabinet to remove a lot of the Treasury's power and give it to Zuma directly.
There's this fantastic story, we'll discuss it with Sikunati later, where Ranjani Munsami speaks about the attempt to take the powers of Treasury and locate it in the Monitoring Evaluation Department, which is, of course, Jeff Radebe, and now, of course, headed up by Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. And that is what's going to come ahead. The other thing that was interesting about what happened is that Julius Malema actually attacked the very commission that he marched for. Remember, he demanded a commission of inquiry, and he talked about the leader of evidence, Mr. Pretorius, as a bastard. He referred to him as a bastard, referred to Pravin Gordhan as a dog. And you had several civil society organizations, the South African Council of Churches, the Ahmed Katara Foundation, speaking about the kind of racial slurs and racial baiting that was going on. And then, of course, there was this massive personal attack on Pravin Gordhan's daughter, who was at Investec, and there was the allegation that she is actually personally benefiting from monies that
But that was fairly easily knocked out of court. I mean, it became so obvious that it was just rubbish.
Absolutely, but also Pravin was very strategic. What he did was he anchored his commitment to fight state capture in the diagnostic report given by Gwede Mantashe at the ANC's policy conference. And then, of course, toward the end, he spoke about the attack on his daughter, and he made the point about play the man, not the ball.
No, well, I mean, this is the terrible thing with, when families get involved, and it wasn't nice. Basically, his daughter worked for his daughter worked for Investec, and like all private equity operations, they have one. What happens is that you go out and you persuade companies to sell themselves to you, basically, and you join them up with other companies and products, and then the big guys all leave, and then they put all the juniors onto the boards of these companies, and she was one of those people. And if you look at the number of boards, it was ridiculous, really, but that was her job, was simply to go there and vote the way Investec wanted them to vote. And
but the impression was deliberately created that she was benefiting personally from
she was getting paid a salary to do that.
Exactly. And the other thing, of course, is this allegation that somehow Pravin has had money going to Canada. And he was explicit. He said, I have no bank accounts in Canada. My daughter has no bank accounts in Canada.
But I mean, all somebody's got to do is prove it,
But this is exactly the point. And so this was the key challenge. All the journalists kept on asking the EFF, you fought for this commission of inquiry. You wanted to be here. Why don't you take whatever evidence you have and actually take it to the commission and let it be tested? And that is actually the challenge, the gauntlet that Pravin Gordhan threw down. He said, bring the evidence. But what was interesting, Peter, is that the EFF's chairperson, Dalim Mpofu, made an appearance at the commission. But guess on whose behalf? On Tom Moyani's behalf, who, of course, wants to cross-examine Pravin Gordhan. But that means, of course, that we are, for the first time, going to have Mr. Moyani having to answer for himself what happened.
Because you don't get to cross-examine without being cross-examined yourself.
Precisely. You can't ask to be cross-examined if you are not going to put yourself through that same process. So this is very interesting. And, of course, we saw that Tom Moyani has decided now to go to the Constitutional Court and to, of course, ask that his, sacking be set aside. The President was absolutely clear on this matter, that the matter stands and they are going to fight it. There's no legal basis, for it. So it's going to be very, very, very interesting. And then, of course, as you know, the other story that has kind of been bubbling under is Dan Machila, the most powerful man of the largest fund.
Investor on the stock market.
Exactly. The largest on the JSE. He said he was going to leave in 5 months, and then we saw him leaving immediately.
Well, it's another head that rolls. We don't know enough yet to be able to say with any certainty that Dan Machila did anything wrong. But it opens the way for a proper investigation into the PRC, into some of the loans it's made, into some of the investments it's made, particularly to do with Iqbal's survey, but not confined to those. And it's going to be interesting to hear the PRC justify some of the pension money, the savings of its members, civil servants, that have gone into very dodgy sounding projects.
But I also think it's going to take us back to Nene, because remember, it was Nene who was, in fact, the Deputy Minister of Finance at the time, and as such, he becomes the chair. And so there's going to be a lot of, emphasis on him. And remember, he opposed the proposal that they need to be more transparent, because he felt that it would disadvantage him. And so the details of why Nene resigned might actually become a little bit more clearer now once the investigation gets underway.
This investigation has to be finished by end of April, I think.
It's quite a quick one. It's quite a quick one. And of course, people like Bantu Holomisa, who've been consistently calling for it, basically said last week when Mr. Machila wanted 5 more months, saying, don't play games with us. You need to go. Witnesses need to come forward. People need to be enabled to actually speak freely about
the other thing about this, the PRC investigation, that it finishes before the election.
Yes, it does. And I think there again, the issue around people who serve on the PIC board, the proxies, we've already seen them messed up and linked to the VBS scandal, and we'll talk to Paulie van Wyk about that later. But we often see investors or people sitting on those committees making decisions essentially as proxies for a range of other people. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this this massive fund is going to be exposed, and we're going to have to take a very clear look at the rationale, the business rationale that went into why these monies were invested where they were.
Yeah. No, it'll be absolutely fascinating. But just one little item of news that I bring you back from Britain. There's a big meeting in Brussels today where the British and the EU will agree to separate on the terms of a separation. And the British have made such a mess of this negotiation. Yes. They now have a situation where they will be subject to EU rules, but won't have any ability to help to shape the rules.
Yes, what was fascinating for me is that everybody said that Theresa May might go, but it looks as if the Conservative Party has a crisis of leadership. Who will replace her?
Well, this is the thing, but who will replace her might be another government entirely. So what they will do is they'll agree today on the EU and the government, but she's still got to get it through Parliament, and Parliament is no way that this deal gets through that Parliament without a vote of no confidence or another election or another referendum.
Absolutely. And of course the EU remains our biggest trading bloc partner. Yeah. So what happens there is absolutely critical. Well, on The Fix, we like to get to the heart of things. And in the hotspot is the South African Airways CEO, Mr. Vuyani Varana. And of course we will be speaking with him shortly after this.